Thanks, Kerry and the GSA for hosting this event and inviting me here to speak at this slot. It was sort of short notice, so I do apologize in advance. You're going to see some ISG branded slides because this has been put together quite quickly. Okay, so I'm really pleased to. I hadn't seen Hemant's slides. I'm really pleased to see what he's just covered because it's thankfully totally in line with what I'm going to share with you today as a sort of an example of how we do agile sourcing. A little bit of my background, been in the industry for 40 years, been doing sourcing for the last 16, 17 years. The first 6 or so worked Vodafone on the buy side, the last 10 and a half at ISG as a sourcing advisor. And I can honestly say that I've only really know the agile approach. I mean, that's really what I've been using for the last, decade and a half, really, apart from a brief stint doing some work at MOD, where obviously in the public sector, things are a little bit different. And as Hemant says, there are restrictions regarding, regulatory requirements, etc. But what I know really is agile sourcing. And this is very much the ISG philosophy as well. Try not to make this too salesy. So I'm going to sort of skip this a little bit because I think Hemant's actually covered this in good depth, but really the what are the differences and what do we see in terms of agile sourcing and where are the benefits and certain levers. The key levers that we see are around speed, so time to market, how quickly can you get through the process. Flexibility is a real key one, and then the reduction of risk. And as long as you satisfy those real prerequisites for agile sourcing, then you can really benefit from a lot of these. So we start with the we call them positive outcomes or sourcing objectives. It's really important. That's really what sets the tone for a sourcing transaction with service providers. Rather than how to deliver it, it's really what is required, and then providers are there to actually help solution on the fly, if you like. So we go for very high level features. Obviously, it depends on the type of sourcing that you're embarking on. We would use a service catalog as the key component for expressing what services are required. That does not go into prescriptive detail like the traditional statement of work. It's very much lightweight, but let's say comprehensive in terms of coverage, but not in depth. We focus on the business objectives, making sure that service providers are fully aware of what those objectives are and how success will be measured by the client, not a set of formal requirements that comes through later. And then it's really important that at the start of a journey, there is really strong communication channel. In fact, regardless of which type of approach you take, between the client and the service providers, to make sure they understand that when you're taking an agile approach, you are going to be doing a lot of time boxing. However, the client is in that driving seat, and if you're one of the buyers here today, it's your decision as to whether you want to change tack in the middle, if you want to change scope or whatever, and that's what agile sourcing allows you to do. So we need to make sure service providers are really on board with that and they understand it. And again, around on the sort of flexibility side, I'll talk about some of the different approaches for kicking off these engagements. I won't dwell on this, but this is the ISG version of the workshops that Hemant has been was alluding to. So we start with what we call the outcome and scope. These are CAS sessions, collaboration and alignment sessions. The first one is just internal with the client, and then the next set are all with the service providers. And this is really the heartbeat of our agile sourcing methodology, which is called Future Source, by the way. During that process, there is continuous down select from maybe from 10 to 8, 5 to 4, whatever. We go through a selection process and evaluation. But what we're seeing as the service provider are reduced in numbers, the solution is becoming clearer and clearer. It almost starts with a very fuzzy picture, and suddenly it comes sharply into focus as you get towards the end of this process. You start seeing that the solutions will align between the last 2 or 3 bidders, because the client says, well, I like a little bit of what these guys are doing, but I also like what they're doing. And I don't like what you're doing here. But what we want to do is you want to bring all those together into a solution which works for us. So you really, and this is something that service providers sort of get used to, is that you may be exited from the process halfway through. You may find some of your ideas get in there. Now, that's not a bad thing, because it's for the client. If you're part of the process, then that's what this process will deliver at the end of it. And you could be the other side, benefiting from some ideas that may have come from one of your competitors. So collaboration is, it's between the providers and the client, but there is also this sort of for the greater good as well. So about the start of the process. So kicking off an initiative, once the objectives are defined, let's provide a scan process, which verbal RFI, or sometimes referred to as provider speed dating. You may have seen that in operations with some of our engagements. And this is where the service providers will come in, hopefully face to face. We're now truly post-pandemic, and I really do recommend doing this face to face, not on a Teams call. But get providers in for half a day with the client, talk about how they will deliver, how their capabilities will support the client's objective, their positive outcomes. No point in just doing a sales pitch. Map the capabilities to the client's needs. And the other thing they're doing is looking at the providers and looking at their cultural fit, and do they have the right capabilities in the right place. There is an alternative approach which I really do like to use, and this is when as a buyer, you're maybe not sure. You want to dip your toe in the water, but you're not quite sure. Do I really want to outsource this? Do I want to insource it? Can this really be done? This is when you're not quite sure how to proceed, or maybe you've got budget to do a feasibility or something like that. So typically you might do an RFI and see what happens. This is an alternative. This is a soft market test, and it just really allows allows clients to actually see what is out there, look at the art of the possible, without committing to a sourcing transaction, without committing to an RFP. More often than not, it will result in an RFP, and it will be a go-to-market strategy. So I said I'll talk about case study. I won't say any client names or anything, confidentiality. I'm taking bidders off here as well. This was a particular engagement I worked on in the last couple of years. And I want to sort of dispel a myth here. Agile does not mean, oh, we do Agile when it's simple. Agile actually works well when you've got complex sourcing needs, in my opinion. And that is because a standard process doesn't always work. And being Agile, it allows the project to correct itself, to take a different course. Sometimes we see changes in personnel. We'll see a change of the CIO in the middle. These projects sometimes take, 6 to 12 months. So quite often there are changes in business direction for the client, changes in all sorts of things, timeline, budgets, and we have to be agile. And this allows you to make those adjustments. This particular client in the Nordics, two actual companies, part of the same group. They had separate sourcing initiatives that weren't going particularly well. We got involved and we consolidated those into a single initiative, which was across 4 service towers, initially defined in 3 sourcing lots, run in parallel, run in fact as one engagement with 5 providers. This was already past the shortlist stage, obviously. And over the course of that year or so, just under a year, it became apparent that actually what the client needed, what they would benefit from, was a single provider. So those sourcing lots were combined into one. Now, doing that in a traditional way, you probably literally have to stop the project and completely start again, go through your process again. This allowed us to do a very quick course correct. Providers were briefed, informed, and they understood, and they pivoted as necessary. And this is just an example of one of the workshops that Hemant was mentioning, the co-solutioning. This is my favorite workshop we call it solution preview. What I like to do here is just go a little bit off piste and say, well, okay, work with the client and say, what do you want to cover? What things should we put into this solution workshop? You've got your usual stuff around transition and commercials, but if the client says, well, I'm really interested in sustainability. Well, let's slap a workshop in on sustainability, and we'll make sure that all the providers come prepared for those sessions. It might be 30 minutes or an hour, but these are fairly short, sharp sessions. The two that I really like here are the dynamic solutioning. Dynamic solution is something that I've used years and years and years ago. And that is really where you give the providers a challenge. And it could be, here is some application, here is some source code. Yeah, or here's some object code. Here's some applications. Go away and come back 2 days later and tell us what you found. You know, where were the, you know, where's the bodies buried? Where was the, you know, how good is the code quality? What are the interfaces like? All of those things. They have all these tools. So why not put them to the test? Why not bring them into that discussion? Or it can be analyze some data from a performance monitoring tool. Tell us what, give us some recommendations. Now, these are things that you wouldn't necessarily do in a traditional sourcing approach. You certainly wouldn't do it in the public sector. But certainly this approach allows you to do that. And the client gets to see the providers in action. So it's a real collaborative process. The other one is bidder's choice. That's something that is a sort of a privilege, not a right. It's if the provider has managed to stay on time in their workshop and they've got through everything and they've got sort of a 45-minute slot at the end and they haven't overrun, they get to present something of their choice that the client has not seen. It's a real opportunity for them to differentiate their services. It could be anything. It could be a video. It could be a walk through their delivery center in India. It could be some AI, some virtual reality, whatever it is. And then, you know, these workshops are structured and tailored for the needs of each client. This is what it looks like. We got a variety from a few different engagements there. We have traditional sort of, we try not to do the big posters anymore from a sustainability perspective. We to go to sort of, we will use slides, but we try to minimize. We don't want to do death by PowerPoint. But we'll do post-its and we'll do whiteboards and flip charts and the like. We also do it virtually using Miro boards and things like that if necessary. But I recommend doing them in the room. You see the sort of the structure there is people sitting around, small groups of people, often in parallel. So we will see on the previous slide, some of those sessions you may notice were actually run in parallel. So we'll have breakout rooms. So there'll be different things going on in different places. It's quite energetic. We do use, I'm sure this is not unique to IHG, we do use sensory toys, music. It really helps with ideation. It helps get a good spirit with the providers and the client. And it really brings people together and just generates a good vibe in the room, because sometimes sitting in, you know, 2 weeks of workshops can be a bit of a drag after a while. So it does sort of elevate and, you know, put a bit of music on at the start and the end, etc. It does bring people to life a little bit, and they get a little bit creative, as you can see there. And on that particular engagement, this is sort of, as I talked about the complexity, you can see here that it was very intense over 7 days in different cities, different locations, lots of material to go through, lots of sessions, 43 people from the client and 105 people from the service providers. Now, if you do your maths, I think it was 5, so it's an average of 21 people. Imagine sort of marshalling people around offices and lunches and everything else. Logistically, it's quite challenging, but this is the sort of thing that we can do through the Agile process. So, conscious time, I want to draw it to a close with a quick summary. I will take questions on the panel, I'm sure. What are the characteristics? And I think pretty much, Cameron, this is what you've been saying, so I was really pleased to hear that. But it's about the provider showing and demonstrating rather than read some material and trust that we can do it. Contract redlining, try to limit redlining in the contract, try to again work collaboratively through the negotiation and contracting stage. The challenges, maybe just highlight one or two challenges here. Some clients will be used to the traditional approach, and working with one at the moment, and you know, we can't tell them how to run the project, but we have to explain you know, the advantages of using Agile. And sometimes it works, sometimes they want to rely on a traditional process. That's fine. It does require a lot of facilitation, so you really got to be on the ball. You know, make sure everyone is in the right place at the right time and it's going well, and if not, you have to step in. The provider bid teams do require coaching. This isn't something that necessarily comes naturally to everyone, so we do engage in quite a bit of coaching. Sometimes it can go a little bit off piece where the client is having a chat about something, and oh yeah, we like that, how about this? We sometimes have to bring them back into the room and say, well, actually, yeah, that's not within your budget, so we may want to sort of put that on the back burner, look at that as a future option. And then making sure that there is we don't end up with a, you know, kids in the sweet shop where we'll have all of that, thank you, and then we get to the commercials and then we find that it's not going to fly. So there has to be a lot of commercial diligence to make sure that you don't that you stay within those budgetary controls. Finally, the benefits there, it does bring this collaborative style from the outset. That then sort of permeates throughout the engagement and hopefully in the BAU as well. So when you're working with that provider, you've worked with them, you've been there and done all the late nights in the office, going through these workshops, and you've already got that collaborative spirit with them, and that's going to help you in the future. The client can see the art of the possible, and that's really important because they get to visualize and they get to see things that maybe they wouldn't have put in the RFP if they'd have gone down the traditional route, because they've suddenly seen something new that's really excited them. And they, as I said earlier, they can make rapid decisions and do change direction very quickly. And then finally, from the service providers, the bidders, they have the ability to adapt their solution, so they're not going in at the outset and placing all their bets on this one solution. They take feedback, and you know, we give them that feedback throughout the process, and sometimes you'll end up with a solution that's very, very different to the one they went in at the start. So hopefully that was just a very quickish overview of what it really is like to run these agile sourcing projects. Thank you. This is what ISG has. This is at the next step on from what we've been doing in agile sourcing. We've now built a platform which is AI enabled. I'm not going to do a sales pitch, but it does take sourcing to hopefully to the next level through the ISG Tango platforms. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.